Um, and it's very similar to, like, if you're drowning, if you're swimming and you're not doing well and you call out for help, very similar way, it, kind of a picture that came to mind when I was doing, or when I was studying this, is if you were swimming and you start to drown, it's not until you call out to God, God, I need you, I really need you, and he reaches down and saves you from the deep waters that are all around you. But to call out for that help, it takes some faith to do that, whether we even realize it at the time or not. Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In a few quick words, anybody have your idea of what faith is? Mm-hmm. Somebody else, Enos. Mm-hmm. Fully persuaded. um, you said, Gideon, you said, what was it you said there? Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring out the word unseen. You're believing in something you really can't see. Perry, what'd you have? Mm-hmm. Yep. Perry, you need to slow down. You're reading my notes. We're getting to the end already. It's all right. That's perfectly fine. That's good. That's really good. Right over here, Jake. Mhm. 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 Yeah. There's a lot of what we're describing. If you were going to explain this to a non-Christian, it's hard to explain a little bit because a lot of it you really can't see. Um, did I see a hand over here? Josh, yeah, go ahead. Hmm. Hmm. Yep. When I was, about 12, I was trying to figure out what the date was on it, but probably 12 to 14 years old. Um, ever since, from the time we started school, I went to a private school, and we had a track day every year. It was probably in somewhere right around the 1st of May, I think is usually when it took place. So up until then, we're having pretty harsh winters, and sometimes by that time our snow wasn't even gone in the first part of May. But you would train as much as you could. We'd do running and all this different stuff, all the different track events. There was high jump, long jump. We had all the different runs. We measured them out in yards, so you had your 100-yard, 50-yard, quarter mile versus the meters and that kind of thing. But so you would pick out of all these different events we did on track day, and it started from all the ones at first grade all the way through 12th grade, and we had all our different divisions. This was all like the northern part of Minnesota, from about halfway in the state up. All these different private schools would come together and we'd have a track meet day. And it was a big deal to us as kids. You picked 5 events that you wanted to be in, and then everybody in your group, age group, from all these different schools of meeting. There was hundreds of kids there. It was a lot of fun. And so it was a big deal. And I remember it was somewhere around 12 to 14. I can't remember exactly the year that it happened. I should put a date on that better because it stood out to me. Still does. It came to mind right away when I was talking about faith. But so this one year, we were doing our practices and all this kind of thing. And I remember that year, the snow had melted some. We were like, yeah, we can finally get out and run on our. We actually used an old road there that we would measure off all our distances, and we were running, we were timing, we were doing it as groups, we were just practicing. Well, up until then, we had practiced some, and then that week of track meet, which was going to be on Friday, that week we're running through all our events again, and it came on Wednesday. We were running through our different events, and you're thinking, track meet's on Friday, so you're hitting a lot of your different events. And Wednesday, I know we pushed it pretty hard through our PE class and that kind of thing. Thursday morning, I got up, tried to get up, and I could not walk. It hurt so bad. My legs hurt so bad. We had overdone it on Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday got up, and I could not walk. And man, was I ever disappointed. I was like, man, are you serious? This is coming up tomorrow. This is Thursday, the day before, and I can't even walk. Somehow I managed to get up, hobbled around, got breakfast, headed off to school, and it was that way all day. I couldn't hardly move all day. And by that night it came, and all day, I'm praying, Lord, take this away from me. God, I got to have track meet tomorrow, And I remember going to bed that night, still could hardly walk when I went to bed Thursday night, praying that you would take this away, God. And yeah, it was a big event for me. So I was like, what was I doing in all of that when I'm asking God, take this away? That was just something I wanted, right? So I could go and do all the races, do all the different stuff that we had planned on doing. But at that point, I was hoping for something else, right? I was hoping for different results, and I was getting all day Thursday. But in my mind, it looked pretty bleak that I'm even going to be able to do anything on Friday because I could hardly even walk on Thursday night. So I was hoping at that point. In Hebrews 11, I think I read that verse, right? Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So what is faith? I would say faith, if you break it down all the way down in a nutshell, if I have faith in whatever, it's a hope. Basically one word, really. It comes down to hope. Now, there's different ways of, do we walk around just hoping for all kinds of, I have faith, so I'm just hoping this happens, I'm hoping this happens. Well, not really, but it is a hope. I have a hope in a much higher power, in the power of God, of course. So it's centered around God. But really, when it comes down to it, faith in itself is hope. Can somebody give me a verse that stands out to you that talks about faith? This one often comes up. Go for it. We're going to get to more of that in just a little bit. Another verse that sticks out. What do we hear? I've heard this verse from Little Up. Walk by, what's the verse? Real short one. Walk by faith, not by sight. That gets quoted to us quite often from Little Up. Let me see if one of these, that one doesn't have a, that one doesn't either. Here we go. Try erase. Wanted to make sure I wasn't using a magic marker. Let's see, if I would write, hard for these over here to see. So I'm writing here, I went to the church. I went to the church. This is like a little English class. I went to the church, a place of worship. This could have a comma here. Kind of a basic sentence. Sandy, you're a teacher. If I go like this, what are them things called? Little marks around something in a sentence? Parentheses. What does that do when I put that around there? Sets it off, and it describes what? Describes the church right there. When it's in parentheses, it describes what is coming, what just was said before that. Well, I want to show you something in this verse. I've heard this verse from little up. Walk by faith, not by sight. That is actually 2 Corinthians 5, verse 7. Let me read the verses, the verse before it and the verse after that. 2 Corinthians 5, 6 to 8. Therefore we are always confident, knowing that whilst we are home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Verse 7, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Verse 8, we are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. That sounds like a lot of blah, blah, blah. I'm not quite sure what that means. Let me break it down a little bit. If you look at verse 7, for we walk by faith, not by sight, if you see that in your Bible, it is in what? Parentheses. That's exactly right, which means it is describing right before that, what was said just before that. Verse 6 says, Therefore we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at it. If you are at home in your body, it says we are absent from the Lord. So I was like, Lord, what does this mean, If I'm at home in the body, that means I am looking at everything in the natural. Is that not right? If you're looking at everything right here, physical, body, it's going to be all in the natural. Doesn't really sound like faith, does it? Pretty much the opposite of what faith is. We're at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. And then it goes right back again and says, the beginning of verse 6 says, Therefore we are always confident, knowing that we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Then it goes right back to it again in verse 8. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body. Let's get away from the natural and be present with the Lord. What does that mean? How do we be present, get absent from the body, but present with the Lord? What's this verse talking about? Anybody want a quick few words on it? What kind of God do we serve? A God that works all in the natural. You should be able to see everything worked out. Very much different than that. We serve a supernatural. There's only two places supernatural things come from. What are they? God, we just said it. Where else? We have Satan and God. Two places supernatural forces come from. One is much greater than the other, but they are supernatural. They cannot be described. They can't be seen as humans producing it, that kind of thing. But we serve a God that is supernatural, and that is what it's talking about here. Therefore, we are always confident, knowing that while we're home in the body, if we see things only as natural, it's going to be real hard to exercise faith. There's people that walk through life, even as a Christian, and never see things in the supernatural. It's kind of a struggle usually, because they want everything spelled out in front of them. I got to see the evidence before I believe. And we probably all know people like that from time to time. You come across them. It's hard for them to believe anything unless it's reasoned out and made sense of right before their eyes. It has to be spelled right out. If they pray for something, well, I can't believe it till I see it happen right here. And that's a hard road to walk down because God is so far beyond that he loves working in the supernatural. It's where we ask him for things that look absolutely hopeless, cannot be reasoned out in our own minds, but you take it before God in faith, and he can turn something like that. When we give it to him, he just loves when we give this stuff to him, because he can take something that looks completely hopeless in the natural and can turn that thing and make it something that is really beautiful and works perfectly. That's just what he does. He does it all the time. We serve a supernatural God that can do absolutely anything he wants. Seems like... So I ask again, what is faith? It is hope, but it's also hope in seeing, or not hope in this, but hope, but based in seeing things the way God sees them. Does that make sense? Hebrews 11:6. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. It's impossible to please God without hope. That's what that verse says. And you read that verse, thinking about what we just talked about in the supernatural. It's impossible to please him without believing in that God can do things far beyond what we can see. For coming to him, we must believe that he is, and that he is rewarded them that diligently seek him. Faith is hoping, but with a confidence in knowing it's all him. It's totally up to him. But we know that he can do this. So there is a hope there, but it's seeing things through God's eyes. And that closeness that you get of seeing things through God's eyes would come through what could be studying the Word. It's just interaction with him on a day-to-day basis through prayer. So prayer, seeking God. Because if we just walk around, oh, I hope for this, I hope for that, I hope for this, that's not really walking by faith. Walking by faith is having a hope in God, seeing things in his perspective. And it's like this verse says, diligently seeking him. I think a lot of this, do you remember me saying here a couple weeks ago, and we went over it at Bible school this year, the ABCs of prayer? I'm going to back up just a little bit and read these other verses. Hebrews 10:22 and 23. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. So have that faith in God, knowing him without wavering. And I think this is where it hit me again, this thing of the way we talked about the ABCs of prayer. I think this goes hand in hand with that. Because we hope for things, we ask God for things, and we live with the hope, but at the same time, we know all along God is in control. And I think it goes hand in hand with this, and I'll just read through these again. The ABCs of prayer. I believe God is able, there's our A, but not required to do what I ask. So I pray, which is the same, you could put right in there, so I have faith. He is able, but not required to do what I ask, so I have faith. God knows best, there's our B, and I don't, so I submit, and I have faith in God. God is in control, and I'm not, so I trust. Control is your C. So it's the ABCs of prayer, but I think it goes hand in hand, talking about faith also. Galatians 2:20 says, and I need a drink of water. This is what this is the verse that Gideon shared there too. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live, talking about that life, I now live, which is in the unseen, going back to 2 Corinthians 5, where we're talking about being in the natural or in the absent from being in the body or absent from the body. I feel like this goes hand in hand with this. But Christ, I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I now live by the faith of the Son of God. So just like Perry was saying, this faith that we have is nothing we can create on our own. It is a gift from God. It's of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. This faith is strictly comes from God. We cannot muster it up ourselves. We practice it. We put it into faith. And I think that practice and that unity that you can have through a relationship with Christ, your faith will grow, but it is still a gift from God. Something that sticks out to me, and this kind of is what spurred this whole thing on for me to start looking at faith, is when the children of Israel crossed the Jordan River, right at the end of their 40-mile trek, right at the end, they're crossing the Jordan River, and God gave them strict instructions of what they're supposed to do, the exact distance from the tabernacle, all this stuff of how they were supposed to cross that Jordan River. Now he told Joshua how this is going to go and what exactly they have to do. But do you realize when it came right down to it, when God said, today's the day, the priests get the tabernacle and we're going to head across the Jordan River. That Jordan River, this is kind of interesting to me when you look at the details of it. This was they said it was, or the Bible says it's in harvest time, which they said the river flows extra full at that time. But the priests got the tabernacle, they got everything set up, certain distance between the tabernacle and where the next group of people were. They headed down to the river. That water never stopped until the priest's feet hit the water. As soon as their feet hit the water, the wall of water stood up. It was extra full, rushing down through. That's when the water stood up. It wasn't until their feet hit the water. That's what actually got me started on this whole thing of thinking about it, because that illustration can be very practical in today. We want to have faith in things, but sometimes it is hard to step forward and take that next step without the physical evidence around you of what is happening. But the faith to step into the water until the water actually stopped for the Israelites. To me, that's just really neat, the way God did that. It wasn't until their feet stepped into the water did the water actually, even though he told them. But boy, that would be hard to do, wouldn't it? You got thousands of people behind you, and they're all looking to you, and you're giving the instructions of what you're supposed to do. All right, go ahead, priest, take that tabernacle down there, and we're going to cross the Jordan River, and it's roaring down through there. You're hoping, and you have faith that this could happen. Now, they did have the experience from earlier on, but to know that God's going to do this again, you're like, God, it's all up to you. But they had faith to walk right in there. When their feet got wet, the water stood up and gave them a dry place to walk across. That's incredible to me. James 1:5-6 says, ask in faith with nothing wavering. I'll read 5 and 6. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. There is so much in the Bible to talk about faith. You go through, Hebrews has so many things, and there's just verse after verse about faith. So we're just kind of skimming the surface a little bit on some of this, because you can get into a lot of depth too about faith. So how do we build our faith? So if we have a hope, we know we can't just walk around hoping for things, but that you are basing it on seeing things the way God sees them, in His timing, building a relationship with Him. We can have the faith, but how do we build our faith? I think a lot of it we touched on a little bit already is building that relationship with Him. Being in tune with Him. Go ahead, Enos. And Jake over here too. There we go. Yep. Over here. Yep. Building our faith. I think I switched that around from what I had. Okay, so faith comes from, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that. Faith comes from pursuing God, putting Him first, knowing He's in charge. Faith is hope. And then coming into the last part, how do we build our faith? I believe building our faith comes from every one of us. And I think Roman touched on this. I think that was last Sunday, sometime just not long ago, though. It comes from every one of us. And I think a lot of it is our testimony time. And we share the little things that God does along the way, and you can just see the hand of God working, whether it is just, some people would say, well, that just happened to be. I don't believe that. It did just happen to be because God's in charge, and we brought it before Him. He loves when we bring our little daily circumstances, whatever it is, before Him, and just let Him work them out. That continuous conversation with Him, with whatever's going on, I think He just loves to be involved in our everyday, every moment of what goes on. And when you do that, you're going to see things go on that you've never seen before. Little miraculous things He does along the way. So often we get focused on the big things and we overlook the little things. I'm saying take the time for the little things. And our sharing time, testimony time, should be clear full of all kinds of them things, because it encourages each one of us to keep pursuing in faith. So I think it comes from every one of us speaking out at church. Don't be shy. Don't be, if it's the smallest little thing, it's something God did. Every good thing comes from Him. Don't be afraid to share them. That's where I believe it includes all of us, which I call faith builders, which is really the title of this whole thing. How do we have faith builders in life to build our faith, increase it? And I think for me, almost 100% of the time, hearing things go on in everybody else's lives too, I'm like, man, that is so neat that them little things are going on with Josh, with who, everybody throughout the day of anything going on. You come here and share them, it builds my faith, and I see things go on. I come here and share it. The next person is encouraged with it, that kind of thing. It's faith builders. Do you have something you weren't going to share there? No. Sure. Galatians 3:5. 3:5, you said? Anybody have something to say to that? 3:5. Do I have the right verse here? Galatians 3:5. He therefore that ministereth to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you, doeth he it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Enos, what do you have to say? Sure. Put that on hold for just a little bit there. I see these things, so these different testimonies and stuff given, I see them as faith builders because it is so easy for us to fall right back into looking for the things in the natural to be done. So often I can look at, well, that's not going to happen because that's not the way that kind of stuff works. But man, I have to remind myself constantly, yeah, but we aren't dealing with what we can only see. Give it to God. Let's see what God will do with it if we just give it to him. And I mean, miraculous things can happen. So I go back to the story of this track meet day when it was incredibly painful even going to bed that night on a Thursday night. Woke up Friday morning and I was blown away. I got up Friday morning, jumped out of bed because I'm anxious to go. We had to leave early to where we were headed. And I could actually walk. And I'm like, I think I kind of remember doing this. I think I went outside. You know, I'm a little bit embarrassed, you know, with who's going to see me from the family. I even ran for a little bit. And I'm like, hold it. I can actually run this morning. Couldn't believe it. Went to our track meet, and I think I I believe I did all the events that I signed up for. I don't think there was anything bad. Now, I remember different times throughout the day, I could feel it just a little bit. And it was like just a little bit of remembrance that remember what you had and what I gave you today is what stood out to me. Because I can't say it really held me up from how bad it was the day before, where I could hardly walk. But it was like a little bit of pain there, just a little bit, to remember this is where you're at, and I'll let you do this today. And it was such a God thing. And it was such a faith builder to me of just taking it before God. It looked totally hopeless that I could do anything. If I remember right, I think Mom had some sort of muscle relaxer or something that she was trying to rub. She's like, man, I don't know. We'll try to work these knots out of your muscles that are causing so much pain. And it still was painful, though, when I went to bed. I had no idea. From when I went to bed, I was kind of down and out a little bit because I was like, I don't see any hope that we're going to be able to do anything tomorrow. To be able to get up and do that, what a faith builder it was for me, which is probably why it still sticks in my mind as a young kid that God did such a miraculous thing just overnight, a night of rest and your body resting, that he could turn it all the way from hardly being able to walk to be able to run and do all the different stuff that next day. So 2 Corinthians 5:7, I think I read that earlier. Yeah, for we walk by faith, not by sight. So we're going to close here. Where it says we walk by faith, not by sight. Is our faith based in the natural or in the supernatural? That's kind of is it based in the evidence we see around us, or is it going to be like the Israelites? Touch your feet into the water, see what God can. Give it to God. God, I trust you. I'm going to keep stepping forward. Sometimes there's an element of it of testing the doors, trying the doors. Do the doors keep opening? God, in faith, I'm going to keep walking forward in this. I give it to you. It's in your hands. If you close the door, I stop immediately, and I regroup with you in whatever it is that you want me to do. But until then, I'm going to try the doors and see if they keep on. I'm going to get my feet wet in the water. God, if you open it for a path for me, I'm going to follow through on that path. So is our faith based in the natural or in the supernatural? That's what I'm going to leave you with today. Did you have that verse there, Enos, that you were going to share? That story right there, I would love to have this conversation with God when we get to heaven, is I would like to know, we don't hear a lot about the little boy that had the lunch, not a whole lot, but I really wonder what was going through his mind for that lunch to be used to feed thousands of people. Because we hear different times in the Bible about childlike faith. And I really wonder what was going through that boy's mind. I got a whole lunch here. I'm going to give it to Jesus. He can feed the people. What that childlike faith that God can do this. Jesus can take this food and feed everybody. I really wonder what was going through that little guy's mind when he gave that lunch to him. And Jesus did. If he wouldn't have had the faith, would that whole miracle taken place? I don't know, because he could have sat there and looked in the natural and said, well, I have a lunch, but I'm not going to give this. This is enough for me this is what my mom gave me. But in faith, giving that, I'm not sure. I'd love to have that conversation with God and see what was in that boy's mind when he gave that lunch. Did he see in the natural, or did he see in the supernatural that, you know what, I got this, maybe Jesus can use this. I don't know what all the stories were that he had heard of the miracles that Jesus had performed up until then, but it would be interesting for me to know, was he looking in the natural or the supernatural at that moment? But, all right. I close the service, Dennis. That's all I have for today.